This is the Tabernacle Podcast with me, Britton Bishop, and today I am joined by the one and only Tim Burgess. What's up, boss? How you doing?
I am fantastic. Wasn't planning on this today.
No one was.
But I feel comfortable and welcome here. So
Love
thanks,
it.
man.
It's the effects of the dungeon.
It's the dungeon, and it's your shining personality.
We made it, though.
But it's the incredible niceness of Benjamin.
Yes, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
his professionalism as well.
Benji Mon over there running the dials. So today, John and I were texting last night. We didn't even think there would be a podcast because of the schools closing and slippery roads and all that. But
did schools close?
I think Buckley closed.
Wow. Okay, cool.
But there was a moment where I realized you live in Michigan, go. Mm-hmm. So I went, and people might think it's dumb, whatever, but I'm excited to be here. Our wonderful executive producer, so not Benji, but Benji's boss, Mr. Matthew Corey Hughes, has hooked us up with some new mics, so we look way more professional than we actually are now. Yeah. They're shorter. This is weird. So we're figuring it out over here. It's like a two-step with the new, like we're trying to figure out what this looks like. So
I'm trying to figure out, forward, sideways.
Yeah.
And it's a different vision thing, too.
I know, I can see. There's not a mic in between.
Yeah, I know it.
Sounds like I actually got to make eye contact with this.
Can you duck some? There we go.
Just get down here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Love it. So as we hit on earlier, we were upstairs in T2. The office is here at our Buckley campus, hanging out. Our campus pastor from Manistee, Seth Bush, showed up with some wonderful lunch for all of us. Chick-fil-A, no free shout-outs, Chick-fil-A. And as we were up there hanging out, it kind of just hit that, okay, the podcast is going to look different than what we originally had planned. Tim, Britton, you're doing the podcast today. And so we came downstairs. We sat in the dungeon about 10 minutes ago. Yep. And we said, what the heck do we want to talk about?
Yeah. And
through a course of just spitballing back and forth, both of us listening to respond rather than just listening to hear, because that's how I work. But but through that, we realized, Tim's been married for a really long time, and Britton's been married for a minute. Mm-hmm. Man, there's a huge gap there.
And so what we decided was to talk about the role of women in church.
I love it.
Sorry, I just had to throw that.
No, I already talked about that with your wife.
I know.
So we brought in an expert.
Yes.
But no, we just decided, why not talk about marriage through the lens of husbands specifically, through the lens of things that you've learned in your 40 years of being married to the gracious, wonderful saint that is Heidi Burgess. Yep. She's incredible. What I love about Heidi, this is what I love about Heidi. She's been watching Survivor. Yeah. She likes Survivor.
She does.
It's cool. But she always finds a way to include those around her. Yeah. So like there's this dude on there that's an OU football player that played on the 2000 national championship team. Yep. And she made me feel like I've been watching Survivor with her, told me the story. It was just this cool thing. So I don't know. Heidi has a way of making you feel like the most important person in the room. Yeah. When you're not in it, because everybody knows when you're in it, you're the most important person in the room to Heidi.
Yeah.
So
you know,
you were outside of it. So
I'll let you in on a little secret that my wife does for me. So I'm getting ready to preach. Mm-hmm. And one day she leans over. This is probably a year ago, and she and it was just packed. And she just puts her arm on my shoulder and whispers in my ear and goes, "There's a lot of people here, but you're my favorite person in the room." Right? And so that's a common phrase now. Yeah. And nobody else gets that.
There you go. Yeah. And love it. Mm-hmm. Well, so we decided, let's talk about it. Let's talk about being a husband. Let's talk about the things that maybe you're good at, maybe things that I have found in our 8 months of being married that maybe are strengths of mine. And there's weaknesses, even in 40 years, that maybe you still have, and weaknesses that I definitely still have. And so just having an honest conversation, two dudes that are married to two powerhouses, incredible women that are way out of our league, but somehow we have stumbled our way into it.
We have stumbled. We have stumbled our way, and your stumble is a little fresher than mine, and totally different culture. Mm-hmm. And when you were first, I remember you not complaining, but just saying, "I don't need help looking for a bride," with all of the women in church, and maybe some guys I don't know that were going, "Hey, you should meet so and so and so and so." Everybody trying to matchmake, right? And you did your own matchmaking, yes, which is appropriate, very appropriate. So, what was the first thing, not looks wise,
right?
Not earthly beauty, about Hope that you went, there's something different.
Yeah, I think it would have been on our first date. We went to, it was kind of during COVID, so it was really weird, like meeting somebody you didn't know and like all this stuff. But we went on our first date to a brewery in Big Rapids. We kind of met halfway.
No, that was a non-alcoholic brewery, right?
No, there was definitely.
Sorry.
No, but anyway, she's sitting there and she comes in, we hang out, whatever. First thing, she wore the coolest boots that take like confidence. So in my head, I'm like, dang, she's confident. This is cool. But we sat down and I think this is it, but it's not, I don't think what you were looking for, but this is just so people know who I am. We're doing the ordering food, right, on your first date. Most girls, I don't want to stereotype, most girls are going something light. Salad, maybe a smaller piece of meat with a vegetable side. My bride, Hope Bishop, ordered a burger and French fries, and that's when I knew. No, but
that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it was just her willingness to have spiritual conversation. Like we talked about hermeneutics on our first date, which most people are probably like, you guys are weird. But I think it was different for us because we were both a little older and we knew why we were sitting at that table.
Yeah.
It wasn't like is this somebody I could have some fun, hang out with? Like, yeah, that was what we were doing. But both of us now, looking back, like we knew why we sat down that day. I wasn't here just to find somebody that I wanted to, like, quote unquote, be friends with, right? It was, we were both there looking for a potential spouse. And so I think just the intentionality that she had, her just demeanor, her confidence, her willingness to be a goofball, because Hope, a lot of people see her around. She's the quiet, introverted, like doesn't have a ton of conversations. She's a goofball, and she's hilarious, legitimately. And I have a lot of people that are funny in my life. Some of my best friends I think are hilarious. Some dudes like Trey, the one who lives in Oregon. A lot of the people from the church met. Dudes that are funny.
Yeah.
But Hope Bishop is the funniest person I constantly have contact with. There will be moments in our home where I am in tears at some of the statements that she says and the things she does. So, but I think ultimately it boiled down to her confidence in who she was and her unwavering commitment to be that. So there was no like, well, this is what I like. And if she liked something else, she just said it. She didn't have to qualify, well, that's good that you like that. Or I could sometimes, you know what I'm saying? But it was very, this is who I am.
Right,
so, yeah.
Right. So you both come from an athletic background.
Yes. Her more than me.
Yeah.
I was a pusher.
Both college athletes.
Yep.
Was there, any commonality there?
Oh, yeah. We definitely told all the stories of commitment and just this adversity. And I think like we're both extremely competitive. Like couples cards nights are the worst.
But see, I was going to ask
with
you
Hope
that
and
next. With that comes competitiveness.
Yeah, we're both extremely competitive. I think there's just kind of this, we're both okay with adversity in the sense of we've faced it and we've seen the effects that it can have on you in the good, in the sense of facing a hard time and what can come out of it through the lens of sports that have now poured into just the everyday.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think competitiveness and I think just like this understanding, because both of us, we played college sports, but neither one of us were wildly successful.
Yeah.
Like I tell people like, I played football, like a career-ending injury. I played in a season. Like I did a decent, good enough job, but I was never what I lived up to my full potential. And Hope was similar with her college soccer kind of thing. Like she just in college, some people, the program's perfect. And so I think both of us lost that identity as well and had to sort through that. So we had some commonalities in that.
Well, Heidi was a college athlete and, a whole lot of stuff. And there's a tremendous amount of competition within her family.
Yeah.
And some of it for me, because here was my attitude. It's a freaking game, right? Yeah, I know your school's name's on it, right? But it's a game.
Yeah.
And that's why I never rose anywhere within sports, because that was my attitude. This is fun.
Yeah.
It's a fun game. And sports are not fun.
Right.
There's moments of fun, but there's a lot of pain.
Yep.
Right, as well. But you have to have that specific drive to be able to be there. What I've seen with you and Hope is that drive extends beyond sports into, like, you were both exhibiting that drive and it doesn't have to be competitive,
right?
But that spirit of competition in your path of what am I going to do with life,
right?
And you both had that, and now it's come together.
Yeah.
So even though you've been married, earthly terms are short amount of time, there's a vast level of maturity that comes out of that, because the mature athlete is going to suit up, show up even when they're sore.
Right.
They're not going to try to cheat on the number of reps.
Yeah.
They're going to, and that's driven from within. That isn't hopefully an external pressure. So where did that come from you, and where did that come from for her?
Yeah, I think for me, I was a part of a culture growing up, just in my home. Even my older brother was always better at everything than me. From a sports perspective, my Bub was legitimately, like, I know the guy we saw at the wedding, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
he's shorter than you.
He's a freak athlete.
Yeah.
Like, legitimately one of the most athletic people I've ever encountered, even at his current state.
Yeah.
You put a ball in his hands, he'll do something with it. Yeah. It's cool. He's strong. He's got the barrel chest.
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of my early life was just trying to keep up. So, like, if we're throwing bullpen in the backyard, I'm catching, and he's 5 years older than me, and he's throwing gas. And so it's just, you got to keep up. And so that's always kind of been my attitude. And then when I found myself running in circles of like age, like skill set people, there was this thing of like, all right, now I get to be the one that sets the standard. So now you all got to keep up. And so that's kind of been like, let's roll, let's go. There's more. There's always something. And I think there's just what having an older brother taught me was you won't arrive. As much as at my youth baseball games, I could be better, or my youth football games, or even at my high school, I could be better than the kids around me. Bub still had me.
Yeah. Okay.
And I never say that to his face. Still to this
day. Does he worship you at all?
No, I tried to get him to. Yeah, we covered that. But
that's a reference from that sermon. Go back and listen to it.
But that, I think, was always lingering in the back of my head, right? I could be the squatting at the high school, and I'd put it on, squat, all my buddies, right? Man, Bub still got me. And so that was always lingering. So from a competitive drive standpoint, I think that early on, having an older brother that was gifted in those areas, and now I think not that it feeds completely in, because it's not about performance as much, but I look at dudes like you, I look at dudes like John, I look at guys like Adam, like Seth Bush, and I'm watching their families, and I'm watching their relationships, and I'm watching how they interact with their wives and the different things in those spaces. And there can be these moments, and even some of my friends, Trey and Andrew, some of those guys, and it's not a competition, but I can look at that and I can see, keep going. You haven't arrived yet. Keep figuring it out. Keep sacrificing.
Yeah,
so
it can give us motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. And how about Hope? What do you think for her?
Yeah, Hope comes from a family that is nothing will be given to you. You will be provided all the access you need to be successful. You will be provided all the opportunity you need to be successful, but you will earn that success.
Got it.
You will work for that success. Mom and dad's success is not your success. And so from an early age, Hope's just a grinder. Like I remember she tells me stories of like being in Vermont and like working at a dairy, and you see cute blonde Hope walking around the Tabernacle, and nobody's like, oh, that girl probably worked at a dairy growing up. And so, and she's also insanely loyal.
Yeah.
So she's one of those people that like she lives and dies with the team. So even if her team's 16-0 or 0-16, she would die for anybody on that team. And that's just kind of, I think, her drive is she is a very team mindset person in the sense that I'm doing this with other people, and my loyalty, this isn't just about me anymore. I'm committed to those around me. And that comes out of her family is one of, if not the most loyal groups of people I've ever seen, right? They love each other really well at times, and they're just loyal to the family, to the family line. And it comes from her dad and her mom's leadership and how they've led that. They kept them as a tight family. They did things together. And so, but yeah, Hope is one of those people that you always want on your team, because you know if there's a second left on the clock, even if we're losing and she's got a broken foot or whatever, but she's still on the field, she's going to do something because she hasn't thought about herself yet.
Yeah.
And so her loyalty to the team is kind of one that comes to play, and that's a quality that I don't always possess.
Huh. So, I'm going to segue to marriage now.
There you go.
Okay. So God built you in Oklahoma, in your mother's womb. Where was Hope born?
She was born in Wheaton, Illinois.
In Wheaton, Illinois. Boy, that's like Wesleyan country there. Yeah. So God still loves her.
Yes.
And she was born, from her mom in Wesleyan world.
Yeah.
Disneyland. And he made you both exactly how he designed you to be. Mm-hmm. And he knew that you guys were going to be together. You had two totally different upbringings. Mm-hmm. A family that stayed together, a family that was broken. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean broken people. It just means it wasn't a nuclear family. Yep. And all of the different experiences, and you bring together two competitive people that could succeed in sport. Mm-hmm. Do you understand from what you've been saying, the qualities that you brought out, why that might be beneficial and a little bit unique in marriage?
In theory?
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's easy to see things from 30,000 feet, but sometimes when you're boots on the ground, you don't always see it.
Yeah. And let me give a disclaimer really quick. Britton and Hope have been married 8 months. Heidi and I just celebrated our 40th. I'm just as jacked up as Britton, and I've had success as has Britton.
Yeah.
Our wives, as much as we adore and love and cherish them, are humans and have flaws as well. Yet, aside from that disclaimer, we're talking about the good parts of our marriage. And I want it from a guy's perspective because what I'm seeing is this, this competitiveness, this drive to success.
Yeah.
Can that translate to marriage?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So how, if it's going to translate to marriage, what might be an avenue? What part might?
Right. Yeah. I think one, for me, a challenge that I face often is you haven't loved her enough yet.
Wow.
And there can be those moments.
Okay, stop for a second. I need to go deeper on that. Okay. I haven't loved her enough yet. What does that mean?
I just think sometimes it can be easy to feel as a dude that you get it right on that one anniversary or that one day you remember everything, and it's not just about the task. It's about the way you emotionally supported her, the conversations you had, and it can feel like there's this moment of arrival.
Okay.
But I think just for me to know, our engagement was fun. Yeah. We did, and I think I've told this story. We got in a fight on the way to get engaged, right? And
awesome.
And there was this moment of we can't fight right now because I've been lying to her for 2 months about where we were actually going. But I think engagement, awesome. We went to this cool dinner, and it's I did it. Mm-hmm. But then the next day, we're planning a wedding.
Yeah.
And then we're doing marriage counseling, and then we hit that wedding, and then we're on the honeymoon stage and all this stuff. But I think for me, to understand that my goal in being married to Hope isn't to arrive, but it's to figure out how can I love her more tomorrow. Even if, dude, I nailed it, right? Whatever that trip or whatever that day or whatever that thing, conversation, the way we handled. You
said the perfect thing.
Yeah, we handled the conflict. I said all of it, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so do you understand how important that is, that statement? Because that shows leadership and humility. Do you remember where you were going with that before I got you sidetracked?
No.
Darn it.
No, it's all good.
I haven't loved her enough yet.
Yeah,
right?
I think.
What a statement, though. I know that there's a lot of women who hear that and long for that feeling. And there's a lot of guys who hear that and they want to turn it off because that scares them and they don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Right?
Me being one of them.
Yeah. Well, and me being one of them as well.
Yeah.
So as men, we're going to suddenly have something affect our life that is inane, that's dumb.
Yeah.
Suddenly your football team's going to lose a heartbreaker, right? Or, the car that you always really loved, you find out has a death sentence.
Yep.
And in those moments, I don't care if it's 8 months or 40 years, it's really easy to forget I haven't loved her enough yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Huh. You just rocked my world with that particular statement. So the only thing that I can share with you is the same thing that you can share with me, and that's our experience.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's why we look down a little bit on newlyweds. It's
right.
oh, you don't have the experience yet. But you have the experience of doing it right.
Yeah.
I have the experience of beginning wrong, right? And it wasn't, Heidi and I weren't evil or bad, neither of us were chasing Jesus. We were both good people, I had no, Heidi was like, oh, he's a preacher's kid. He'll be able to tell me everything about Jesus and God, and this will be amazing. He'll know the whole Bible. And I'm like, no, my Bible got left in Michigan, ma'am. All right. And it's probably going to stay there. So, we met and dated a little bit, fell in love, and moved in together and lived together for quite a while, and then got married. And that's all backwards. Yeah. And the beginning of our marriage was, in particular, the beginning was without Jesus. It was just with us cool people, because that's who we were.
Right.
And as much joy and fun, and I'm not going to tell you that it ever felt like sin. And our hearts were in a real married way for a long time, but that's a cop-out, So we began incorrectly, and that took us 5 years to get over. So you're already ahead, right?
Yeah.
Because it took us 5 years to start to figure out why was it though? Why was me pursuing Heidi the way that God desires me to pursue Heidi important? Well, because it's right.
Yeah.
Number one, and I didn't want to believe that, and it also took a bunch of work.
Yeah.
It took me beginning to look at Scripture a little bit. I mean, Scripture was still a really long way away, but I knew it, right? I'm a little theologian growing up in the house of a preacher, and I didn't know where it was in the Bible. I couldn't tell you the exact quotes, but I knew how a man was supposed to treat a woman.
Right.
And that was because of the example of my dad, and he was far from perfect. So I came from a jacked up family who were doing their best to becoming that jacked up guy. And so, we were 5 years in or whatever. So we just finished our 40th anniversary, and I just had my 35th year of sobriety anniversary.
Let's go.
So, yeah, that's
a fist bump.
Yeah, that's a big deal, isn't
That's
it?
awesome.
And it doesn't, I really don't want to go there, but I'm shocked that it's 35 years that I made it this far. I have not arrived yet. But that first 5 years, so you understand, I was using. And Heidi was an active codependent. She was a high achiever, very competitive. And her mindset at that time was, if Tim will just do these things, then we'll have our poop in a group and everything will go fine.
Yeah.
And here's all that Tim needs to change is just this. And so the next 5 years, up to the 10-year of marriage, was us figuring out, what did we have to do, right? What does that even mean? And she had to realize that she had to change, that it was a partnership. So when you're going home to hope, you aren't necessarily going home to just another human being, right? It's not like, it might be Bill or Bob or Susie or whoever. No, you're going home to your wife who has a definitive role and definitive goals. And you guys knew a bunch of that before, and I didn't. So we're going to be able, between the two of us, meet both ends of the scale of what that beginning is like.
What would you say in that beginning stage for you, like in being married for those 5 years? I guess the question, like, what was your goal within that marriage? You know what I'm saying? Like, why did you do it? And then what was the goal for those 5 years?
I'd never set a goal in my life.
Okay.
So I didn't like goal setting. So I had no clue what that even meant, setting a goal. I was very much a day-to-day person, but I knew that I wanted all of the days to include Heidi. And there was a spark, an incredible level of intelligence. I was enamored with her work ethic. I was enamored with how she treated people. She wasn't scared of things, right? And at that time, fear ruled a portion of my life. I never would have known it from the outside, but on the inside, that made most of my decisions for me. And I just knew that somehow or other, this person was supposed to be with me.
Yeah.
And it was definitive.
Yeah. So
now, what I know today is I knew God had a plan.
Yeah.
And he picked Heidi for me for a whole lot of reasons, even to, just preaching a couple of weeks ago and having her lean over again and saying, "You're my favorite person in the room."
Right.
I need that.
Yeah.
And it's intuitive. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your
No,
question.
it 100% does. I think not. I think Heidi does a very good job or you can see that God's design in your marriage and how you complement one another.
Mm-hmm.
Hope and I experienced that in our marriage counseling process with the two of you. Just the avenues of communication, the way that you saw different circumstances, the way that you addressed different matters, and how you looked at things from a different lens, but how you also found. I think it's cool how your two perspectives become one, though, as well. Over time, I think we saw that come to play. And so that's where I'm like, so you had these two perspectives, these two kind of ways that you lived life of being the day-to-day, having set a goal. Heidi, high achiever in the medical field, very driven academically and all those things. And so Hope and I have experienced the side where it's like, man, those things have become one idea. And they get there differently, but they end up at this place. Was there a time where one was happening and one and the other was happening, but they weren't finding their way to the same idea or the same place?
Yeah.
So what was that like? How did that cause? What was that tension for you guys on your end, and how did that lead to you as a husband feeling, and how did you address or handle or deal with that?
So being a manipulator, there was truth about me that even though I knew it was true, I was able to fool other people around me and myself. The one person I wasn't able to fool that wouldn't go along with it anymore was Heidi. Right? She could see clearly. And she realized that she was going to be trapped in this circumstance. And she needed to make a decision of what does this trapped in this circumstance look like? So she's making this, things have to be different. We have kids now. We're adults now. We had Danny at that time. We just had one. But we got a house. We got, cars and jobs and all that stuff that you have. But it wasn't a home, and so Heidi's looking long term. What is it going to be like when he starts kindergarten? What is it going to be like if we have more kids? What is it going to be like? How are we going to support ourselves? I want to be a stay-at-home mom eventually. I'm willing to work towards that goal. Tim can't do that right now in the way he's living. He could hold down any job he wants, but he's never going to do it because it's this word called responsibility that I kept running from, and I could manipulate even myself into believing it's temporary. But it's the reality wake up is when it's not temporary, right?
Yeah.
Unless I make a change. And so for the first time in my life, it's like I have to change something, and it isn't my pants or my car that I have to change, right? It's me. It's the core of me. So that's how we both got to that spot of something needs to change. Yeah. Well, in an alcoholic, drug addict circumstance, the most obvious one to go first is the drug addict alcoholic, right? That needs to change, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
And, so then the next bit of that journey was, probably the next 5 years was us figuring out what Heidi needed to change as well, because she complemented she earned money, solid reputation, hard worker, blah, 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 blah. I spent money, partied, and didn't have a goal in the universe, right? So she was compensating. It's like, okay, now this needs to start becoming equal. Well, for her to say, okay, I need you to earn enough money and to take care of all of the bills. Suddenly, it's like, I honestly don't know how to do that. I really don't. I don't even know what that means yet. And plus my self-confidence was incredibly low. So it's like, well, who would ever hire me? This is ludicrous. So eventually she ended up becoming the voice of support, not blowing smoke, but it's like, no, here's the gifts you have. Here's the talent you have. This is who you are. This is how God wired you. And that was when she began, to go to church, to find, I was attending too, but it was a ludicrous situation. And we talked about that in another podcast, but her getting herself healthy, willing to look at her own stuff without me. And I'm talking family of origin, traumas that had happened to her as a child or a young lady, the decisions she was making about her her actions and her feelings and the words that would come out of her mouth. She needed to realize that she was actually had control over that, and she was responsible for it first, with or without me. And that's a really scary place to go. And consequently, on the other side, I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. And somehow we're trying to maintain this marriage. And there were many times where it was a battleground. And it's it's the worst fight. It's the worst battle to ever have. You know, it just is, because nobody wins. Everybody gets wounded. You know?
Yeah.
And even if you think you win, you end up feeling like dirt. Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, husbands out there that are in the midst of change for themselves, my encouragement is continue to change. You know, where's God looking at your life, and where is he asking you? What is he pointing out to you that you could maybe do better, or maybe try something for the first time? And you can't rely on your wife's response to be the motivator. The motivator has to be other godly men around you, people who've been through it, that are sharing their experience, strength, and hope.
Yeah.
We do it kindly and lovingly, but we're also going to do as God has been patient with us. I just love how many times in the Old Testament it talks about God as a patient God. You know, because how many times do I want him to just go ahead and stomp on the Israelites?
Right.
And he's a patient, loving God. Well, we're supposed to be that way. We're in his image. We're supposed to be patient for our woman, for the one God's given us. And that means during a struggle, I might have to give up something, right? Even my pride, I have to shoot that. And I have to allow her to find God and be an asset to finding God and God's will for her. You know, and so much of that involves verbal communication. Right?
Yeah.
So one of your favorite things to talk about is feelings, right?
Love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you just shine in that area. You've done papers, you got a PhD.
Yeah, I know why I feel what I feel, when I feel what I feel, how I'm going to feel what I feel before I even feel it.
Yes, you're so good.
No, I hate feelings. They're stupid.
Yeah.
They're uncontrollable. And I have no idea why they happen.
Yeah. And women feel them in a different way than men do. So not only is that's incredibly complicated then.
Yeah.
We're struggling to figure out why there are feelings and why I might be feeling this way. And now we're supposed to understand this foreign creature called woman.
Yes.
Who's having feelings maybe at a louder level than we are.
Ones that I've never felt before.
Yes.
Or maybe I have and I classified it as something else.
Yes, exactly. Craziness. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I did not just say that.
Right.
But, you know, but during that, so here's one of the things that, as I've listened to you share stories with me that we won't share on here, just, you know, in passing, sitting down for 10 minutes. And, you know, it's cool because I'm going to be 63 this year. How old are you, Britton?
I am 27.
27.
Just
and
27.
How many times I'll sit down with Britton somewhere, you know, we're just passing or stand there and talk. And I feel like an equal. You know, I don't feel like I'm 63 and he's younger. I feel like, you know, we're both 30. You know, it's a really weird mindset, but I don't ever look at you as younger. I look at you as an equal. And what I've loved is you look at me that way. That's the feeling I get. So we have these conversations, right? And we can get pretty deep pretty fast. I mean, you and I aren't going to sit down and discuss all the theological differences in the world, but we're going to talk about some relational things, maybe in a different way.
Yep.
And I really treasure that. Most men don't experience that.
I think for me, you're the only person outside of Hope that I address feelings with.
Yes.
Including all of our coworkers. And I don't know if it's just because of the time we've spent maybe in the counseling room.
Yeah.
But there's something about you in particular that I haven't been able to figure out that I wish I could figure out, because then I could fix it. Maybe then I could avoid it. But I don't know. I think since the mushroom Swiss at Patty Cakes 3 years ago, when I went on my adventure during an interview, it was just like, okay, this is your guy. Like there was just something that happened, and I can't pinpoint it. But there's just, and I would hope that dudes listening to this that want to follow Jesus, like that dude you talked about, that are going to encourage you for strength, hope, and to love. It was clearer than mud, right? Or whatever. But it was clear 3 years ago that's this guy's role in your life. That's who this is for you. Mm-hmm. And there was just that click, because I was coming out of some trauma. I was coming out of a really messy situation from my previous job that I was in, previous relationships that I was in, just all of the stuff that I carried with me to the tabernacle as a 20-something-year-old communicator that some reason you guys hired, probably because he volunteered to fundraise his salary. But
yeah, that was it.
Yeah, but there's just that piece, and there was something though that clicked that was, and I couldn't put words to it then, but now I can. This is who that's going to be for you.
Yeah,
this is your encouraging you to strength, hope, and love. You can go there. And I think it was just a safety thing that you never communicated, but that you exhibited.
Okay.
And I think that's what it was, and that's why those conversations happen. Like, it's why we go from hockey to, well, this is what's going on with Hope and I, or whatever it is, right? And and I think it's as well because now my wife feels safe with your wife.
Yeah.
So I think we've just kind of agreed that this is our place.
Yeah.
These are the people that can know and can hear and we can experience and process and whatever. So I say all that to say what Tim said about finding a dude, find a dude. And yours isn't Tim because he's mine. And so that's what I've decided.
Yeah. And I'm getting old.
Yeah.
So, and so in the course of what you just said, there's a struggle that all men seem to have in communicating with their spouse. And I think every man who's married and loves his wife has experienced the deer in the headlight look multiple times, maybe multiple times a week, where something is said. And, the old comic one was, do these make me look fat, right?
Right.
And it's like deer in the headlight. What do I say,
right.
that's going to be appropriate? But we'll find ourselves in those positions. And one of the reasons we stay there is we don't know how to communicate our way out of it.
Yeah.
Right? So there's been many times where I'll be in a conversation and somebody will say something like, okay, wait a minute, what do you mean by that? Mm-hmm. Because that sounds really profound or that sounds really scary to me. What does that mean?
Right.
Most people don't have that in their life. The one place that it has to happen is in marriage. Because you and Hope come from different worlds. Mm-hmm. Heidi and I come from different worlds. And we didn't, this isn't an arranged marriage where our families taught us all the same language, right?
Yeah.
So we have to be clear, crystal clear in our communication. And it takes effort and it takes desire. And the desire is for my wife's benefit. Mm. So I'm not going to go, well, what do you mean by that? In an accusatory way, and then me take offense.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, no, I don't, okay, help me understand this better. Right.
Why would you say, in your experience, and you've done a lot of counseling and you've been married for a minute, you've had a lot of conversations, why would you say that this topic of communication is one that seems to me at this time to be the biggest struggle in marriage for men specifically? Mm-hmm. And maybe break that down for the dudes listening or maybe the women listening that can now understand this is probably why your husband is feeling or exhibiting these traits, not to what's the word I'm looking for, justify his actions, but to maybe make them aware of maybe this is why this is happening.
Yeah. That's a really interesting question, and it's a very long answer, in my opinion anyways. But when you think about how men grow up, we start out as boys. And the biggest change is we're going to have a physiological change that's going to add, all the secondary and primary sexual characteristics of a male, right? And those are going to happen. And at one point, we become enamored with one part of our body, and that's obviously our right hand, right? Or was it our left? I don't know. No, we become enamored with sex, and what does all of that mean? And it all of these hormones, flush through our body. But if you take that out and look at how men communicate, Britton and I show up on a basketball court together. Neither of us are gifted basketball players. But the first thing we do is pass the ball back and forth and shoot. There's no conversation about it. We're on a basketball court. We're indoors. Mm-hmm. We have squeaky tennis shoes on. This is what it sounds like. This is what it smells like. This is what you do. We've watched other men do that a million times. It doesn't matter what it is. We've watched them. Mm-hmm. And we'll just begin to play. It's just this natural aspect. So any type of a sport, we can sit down and, a card game. we might need to learn the rules of the card game or the house rules, even a game of pool, sitting down and watching a football game together. This is how it happens. Why? Because we've seen men do that. Mm-hmm. Almost all of it is silent.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have a conversation about where you're going to go. Are you going to be at the top of the key? Are you going to be, outside? Are you
right.
3-point land? Or are you in the paint? Where are you? Right?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. We begin to play. Coaches are the ones who talk.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are going to tell us what to do. And we get a little conversation, but we get monologued.
Yeah.
We often got monologued by our dads as well, because dads were busy.
Yep.
And he would been at work all day, and then he comes home, and it's like, well, we're not going to have a conversation about how to change the oil.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say, son, we're going to change the oil. Mm-hmm. We're going to go out and we're going to jack the car. We're going to get out the tools we need, the pan to catch the oil. We're going to begin to do it. I might say, hand me that, right? Mm-hmm. Hand me this. Okay.
Hold the light better.
Yeah. Hold the light better. Yeah, that's it. And there's going to be a couple of pointing out. You see how, I put a little bit of oil, on the oil filter gasket. That's what comes off easy. And, this is how hard you put it on.
Yeah.
And then we go, okay, this one takes 6 quarts of oil or whatever. And that's it. And then, well done, son. Mm-hmm. Now don't ever touch my car.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how males learn.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that there aren't some dads that have gone out of their way, or even some of us, have gone out of our way to have the convos. But if you really watch, those combos are intentional. They don't just happen. Dad makes them happen. So if that's the case, we're having all of these unconversations. Why would they ever involve feelings? Everything we do is in action, right? Mm-hmm. So here's the route. You're going to run to this and go left, and the ball's going to be there.
Yep.
And they're all directions on how to accomplish. So I think that's how guys learn.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is very appropriate. What we miss in that is God the Father really desires us to have conversation. And he shows that in the prodigal son. Now, it might not seem like, but you have to extrapolate a little bit. And when the prodigal son comes back, there's conversation that happens, and nothing is about doing. And then when he goes to the elder son is all about doing. Mm-hmm. Like, Dad, I changed the oil, remember?
Yeah.
Exactly how you wanted it. And he's like, yeah, but that's not what I want more. I want more with you, and you wouldn't take it.
Yeah.
So it's a conversational God. So men struggle with this conversation, number one, because we don't learn it. Number two, we kind of have this assumption that once we reach all of our secondary sexual growth, the primary and secondary, once we can grow a beard, have sex, all of that, suddenly we're supposed to know how to do everything. And every time we don't know how to do everything, we feel minimized and embarrassed.
Yeah.
Right? And rather than going, well, why would I know how to do that? Will somebody teach me? Mm-hmm. Right? That's why there's been times where I've praised the heck out of you, because you've come and asked me a question. And it's been a question, it wasn't something I was thinking about, but it's like, I want to do this better. How do I do that?
Yeah.
And that's this high level of maturity. So guys, it's like, I'm married. I did all of the things.
Right.
But it isn't good at home right now. Well, the one thing we didn't do is learn how to communicate. Right?
Yeah.
Especially on an intimate level.
Yeah.
That may or may not involve feelings. And feelings are overrated. There are times in a marriage where you've got to, I don't care how you feel, we need to get the job done. Our kid just fell and needs stitches. You can feel all you want, but right now we're driving fast to the hospital.
Right.
We can talk about that later, right?
Yeah.
So there's appropriate and inappropriate times. So that's why, in my opinion, guys struggle so much.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Never learned it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was I could have just shortened it to that, couldn't I?
No, I think that the way you said it, though, gives perspective.
Yeah.
It gives the ability to empathize, and it gives people the tools they need to understand that this is something we're going to learn together.
Yes.
Because I think that is something as well, is everybody's communication will look different. So Hope and I have learned that although we did our marriage counseling with you and with Heidi, and we did a segment with John, you guys' marriages are your marriages.
Yeah.
As much as there are aspects and parts of your marriages that we want to emulate, that we want ours to look like, there are just avenues that it's going to look like us instead. And rather than be dissatisfied with the fact that it's not exactly like what we want it to look like, we have to figure out for ourselves what's that going to look like. And I think communication is the piece that I think looks differently in I think it's like a snowflake, right? Mm-hmm. Is it looks different for everybody because there are people and personalities and different issues and different traumas that affect those things. Yeah. And I think the thing that Hope and I have realized is, and it's been a short moment, but communication isn't perfect, nor will it ever be. So let's just try. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the piece, because I think for a lot of dudes, myself included, sometimes when I don't know what to say, I decide I won't say anything. Mm. And what I've learned over the past few months is it's better to say the wrong thing than to say nothing.
I'm going to agree. Now there's a disclaimer there, because every now and then what's going to come out of your mouth.
Right.
And it would be best to be silent.
Right.
So suck that one up and be silent. But then also say, I'm choosing to be silent right now because I don't really know what to do.
Yeah. Something that I've learned from the Browns. They taught this at the Marriage Conversation 101 thing. Ben and April adapted a strategy where they would say, this is going to come out messy.
Yes.
And so for Hope and I, and we don't do it all the time, and we're figuring it out and not even close to figuring it out, but there are times where it's, all right, I'm going to verbally process, vomit, throw up on you. I need you to hear none of it but what I'm trying to say. And you're not allowed to get mad. Here it goes. And then you just let her rip.
Yeah.
And the goal within that isn't to have a free pass to say hurtful things or whatever, but it's to, for some people are verbal processors. So in that aspect of, if I don't think I can say it well, the verbal processor won't say anything. Mm-hmm. And then they never get to process. And then we find a stuffed emotion. And then we find somebody that's numbing out somewhere else and processing in a different vice. And so I think learning those rhythms, but those were two things that we learned. One, communication tactic that we learned from you and Heidi was, do you want me to listen or do you want me to fix this? And so as a man with the personality traits and the personality tendencies that I have, I will lean towards fix. I will listen to respond. I will listen to influence. I will listen to fix. And then there are times where I need to shut up and I just need to listen. Mm-hmm. I need to hear what Hope's saying, and I don't need to respond. I need to say, I'm sorry that happened. That was probably really hard. You're right. I have no idea what that's like. And right now, I'm experiencing extreme levels of conviction because I could do better. I could do better. And I think that that aspect of communication is, one, putting strategies in place that are okay to have, that aren't just, man, we got to figure this out. But no, have common language of, do you want me to listen to respond or to fix this, or do you want me just to hear you? Second one that we learned from Ben and April was, this is going to come out messy. I am going to verbally process vomit on you. And for the next 30 seconds or 30 minutes, I'm talking, you're sitting there. Mm-hmm. And so I think that those are two things that we've learned. So learned meaning not applied, but we have it in our heads.
Yes, and the way it will become a common application is when you continue to practice it, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah,
and then it becomes routine. In that verbal messiness, I think that's a really gorgeous term, and I want to make sure that we're not arming somebody inappropriately.
Yes.
When that happens, one of the words, because we have something similar, we call it something different, but I'm not allowed to say you, right? Because if I make my wife sit there for 30 seconds or 30 minutes while I'm going you,
yeah,
right?
That's good.
That's just pure attack.
Yep.
Usually it's like I'm feeling,
mm-hmm.
and it's illogical. Mm-hmm. It's the to sum it up.
Yeah,
I'm feeling this, and
that's
it's
good.
illogical.
Add that to the tool belt.
So that's not permission. That's just saying I don't have this perfected yet.
Yep. Yeah.
I wish I did.
That's
so
good.
And in that fix aspect, the question I ask is why do we want to fix it?
Yeah.
Right. And it's because we want it to go away.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's intrusive.
Yeah.
So that means we're selfish.
That's so good. That's so true.
Yeah.
Because that's the one thing. Every time I talk to people and they're like, "How's marriage going? Like, what's it like?" And I was like, I realize every day how selfish I really am.
Yeah.
And at the end, like that's what it is. That's what bulk of our problems. Do you ever get nervous on the podcast that as you open up and you're vulnerable, people are just hearing your problems and not addressing their own?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I've realized that the more I've gotten to teach and preach and do a podcast and stuff is you sit here and you hope that these conversations are leading people to think about their own life. Mm-hmm. But often they'd rather just think and assume all the problems of your life and not deal with their own.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it leads to me not wanting to be vulnerable. Do you experience that ever? Sorry, I just said a lot of things over my head out loud.
No,
the listeners probably don't always hear.
This is therapy because whatever story I share about myself, I don't ever want to be considered a hero.
Right.
Right. But I also don't want to always be considered the problem.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is an experience that I've had. And I mean, I do that all of the time in preaching.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of my greatest strengths is to be able to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
In those situations. And sometimes somebody will come up afterwards and say something, and I'm always gracious with it, and I'm also giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're complimenting.
Yeah.
But it almost come out like, wow, you really were jacked up. You really, wow.
Yeah.
You really, it's amazing how God got you back or whatever. And it's like, it didn't feel like that at the time.
Right.
And it was, like being an alcoholic, drug addict, one of the things I've tried to share with people, I was a really fun person, and that doesn't mean I was like the life of the party, but it's like, let's go rock climbing.
Right.
Let's, mean, let's go tubing. Let's go. I was always, okay, now we're doing horseshoes, and then like horseshoes are getting boring, so we're going to throw them behind our back.
Right.
Right. And it was always a new competition, a new fun thing to do. Yeah. I wasn't there all slurry, getting ready to get in a fight or trying to pick up your wife.
Right.
I was just really pleased to be alive and drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's what I think sometimes, especially like some of the groups I've been able to be a part of, fight clubs, different things like that, is as leaders, as dudes that are tasked with this thing of trying to lead people in a direction spiritually, it can be misconstrued sometimes as you share a vulnerability.
Yeah.
As, man, that guy's got issues.
Yeah. And really what I want out of that is I want somebody to go, wow, I'm not the only one.
Yeah, exactly.
There's somebody that, look, he just said it out loud that he struggled with that.
Yep.
And that can be freedom. In a fishing line, basically, is you can go ahead and grasp that line and get pulled back in.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's the first step, and you might grab the next fishing line coming your way. Sometimes the biggest step is just a realization of I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Because the big fear that so many of us have is if anybody really knew me, they would run away screaming. Welcome to the world. That's called human in depravity.
Yeah.
And so some of the terms that the theological terms and propitiation and some of those things, you really get down to the definition. It's like, whoa, that's pretty serious.
Yeah.
That's pretty degraded humans to cause this.
Right.
So it's like, that isn't everybody else. That's Britton and Tim and Benjamin, right?
Yeah.
So
you don't get out of this, Benji. No.
Yeah, you don't.
No, we're talking about marriage. You're still in it.
So, in listening, one of my simple things, if there's a football game on and you're facing the TV, go get a different seat, look away. I am a child and my eyes are drawn to a TV.
Yeah.
If I have a device, I have to close it, turn it over, shut it off, because that doesn't count as listening.
Yes,
if those things are there.
On dates Hope and I have went on, she has made me aware of I can't not look at the TV.
Yeah.
And so like
it's
if we
terrible.
go somewhere, and sometimes there are dates where it's okay.
Well,
there was one where like we went to the place in Traverse City, Barrio. Have you and Heidi been to Barrio?
Yeah.
Really good tacos.
Yeah. Oh,
and it was on a Sunday, and we were about to go to
and
another.
They have several screens right there.
Yeah.
Were you sitting at the bar?
We were walking in, and the lines were about to be on, and we just kind of were like in this moment of like, we could sit at a table, but do you just want to go sit there and look at the screens together and eat our tacos and talk about our fantasy football? And so there are times that's what we do. Yeah. But there are also times where we go on a date where conversation's needed or desired or it's been lacking in that area. And so I have had to become aware, because I wasn't until I met Hope, that no matter where we are in the restaurant, my back has to be to the TV because otherwise it sucks my eyes away.
Well, okay, so I'm going to go out on a limb.
Okay.
The worst sport on the planet to observe is tennis.
110%.
I can't stand tennis. I don't want to play tennis. Whenever I've been given a tennis racket, the only thing I do is hit home runs. How about you? You know what I mean? Two-handed.
Oh, yeah. No, Hope loves tennis, and it's because she can beat me at it.
Yeah, but
not ping pong, though.
Heidi and I can be, I remember being up at La Senorita one time, and it's like, I needed a La Senorita burrito as big as my head.
Yeah.
So we went in, and there was a freaking tennis game on, and I couldn't quit watching it, and it just pissed me off. So I moved.
Yeah.
We swapped seats, and there was a soccer game on the other one, and it's like, well, my kids play soccer. At least I know what's going on.
Right.
Right. And it was terrible because I'm so ADD or I'm so driven to that motion. And I would find myself like listening to my wife and having this wonderful conversation. And then I would drift off and suddenly I'm not hearing a word. Mm-hmm. And so we have to set ourselves up for success. How's that?
No, 100%. So I think knowing yourself, being aware as well. I don't know. Is there ever times for you guys in communication or in your marriage where you need to take a break before you have the talk?
Oh, yes. Yes, many times.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's so okay. One of the reasons we even ask that question that it's not just accepted is because us guys typically have been so good at avoidance, right? And if we just don't talk about it, it'll go away. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it doesn't. So, but there are also times where maybe the heat of the moment, maybe it was just a really rough day that has nothing to do with your spouse, and everything that went wrong, that could go wrong at work did.
Yeah.
And you're maybe in charge of something, and you come home and you're just frazzled, and it's a bad time, and it's really super smart to say, let me tell you a little bit about my dad. I had all of these things going on, and I want, and those are all very important, but they pale in comparison to the importance you bring to my life. I can't do this conversation right now. I will say to Heidi, and this is another thing we can talk about is common language. Mm-hmm. I've used all my words right now. Yeah. You need to give me a chance to get my words back. So after, a really busy day of counseling and maybe a little strife on staff and preaching, I'll get home and it's just like my words are used. Mm-hmm. I can talk, but the chances of me swearing are going to be really high. And the chances of me having that crappy look on my face, that hurtful stare or almost a sneer.
It's my blank stare is what Hope calls it.
And it's the risk of those being uncontrollable are very high. Yeah. And it's like, I don't want to waste any energy apologizing. I don't say that part, but that's how I'm feeling.
So how did you guys develop? Because it could be easy, because there might be trauma attached to the avoidance of it for some people that when they don't want to talk about it, they storm away. So how did you develop a healthy rhythm around, for the lack of a better term, I need some space for a second?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's sit next to me, but we're not going to talk or whatever. But how did you develop that rhythm? What were the growing pains? What are some things that you learned along the way, maybe for those listening that need to develop a healthy way to say, let's take a second?
Joe Kelly was instrumental in that for me. And it was, because Joe would say, Tim, you have a tendency to be intense, a lot of passion. No. And you will push buttons when they don't need to be pushed. And he goes, those aren't bad qualities, but they're really ugly when you use them wrong. So when you're feeling that way, you need to be able to say, I need a break. And you need to, Joe and I picked the garage because I have a detached garage. And so I would say to Heidi, I need to go to the garage. And it took a while, but she finally, because she was thinking in the beginning I was going to the garage because she was a horrible person. Mm-hmm. And I was going to the garage so I didn't say she was a horrible person. She wasn't a horrible person, but that's what I was doing. So then I would go out to the garage and it would take, Britton, I have times when I would be out in the garage for 6 hours, right? And because that was as good as I could do. I had to send in a little peace treaties every now and then, right? But, soon it got, hey, I'm going to go to the garage. And it's like, by the time I get to the garage, I'm not going to be pissed anymore. Just give me a couple of minutes here. Let me breathe deep and think about this. To the point of going, yeah, this isn't a good time right now, but we're going to come back to it. And I had earned the trust from Heidi that when I would say that, I would come back to it.
So how did you at the beginning? So over time you had to just keep. You had to prove I'll come back to it.
Yeah. So it was like it might take me hours to it's getting better now. An hour would be a lot to 15 minutes to by the time I get to the garage, it's going to be over. Right. So let's not buckle up. It's Northern Michigan. Don't put your boots on and your winter coat.
Right.
To go away for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. Just stay here and just say, give me a second. Or there would be, so after that time, I would be able to say, it's just not a good time right now.
You develop the trust.
And I had to earn that trust.
It's capital, essentially.
Yeah. And so it wasn't on Heidi to give me the trust. It was on me to earn it in the beginning. And the message she had to give herself was, he isn't leaving because I'm bad. He isn't walking out to the garage because I blew it. He's walking out to the garage because he wants to honor me. And this is the best way he can honor me, right?
Yeah.
Is to, because he loves me, he's going to calm down. And that anger that he has nothing to do with me.
So what guidance, encouragement, advice would you give to the one that maybe has trauma attached to the I need some space? How do you begin that process of allowing the other person in your life to earn that trust?
I think, again, it comes down to good communication first at a sane time. That's when
Explain that.
Okay.
Insane.
So when we're sane, that means I have confidence in who I am, and I'm not wounded right now in any way, shape, or form, right? So I've worked hard on my relationship with God, and whatever hard is, but I've worked on my relationship with God and understand my identity with Him. And we've declared that we're going to be together, and I'm going to begin to trust that, and I'm going to keep trusting that. And even in doubtful moments, I'm going to trust that. Yeah. That's sanity.
So you're like a 10 on the sane to insane scale. Okay.
Yep. So if you're sane, right? So what was the question again?
So I have developed this language in my own life, but Hope didn't understand it.
Okay, the trauma.
Yeah, the trauma, but there's that. I'll go back to that, but I think this is worthwhile because there's that aspect that people forget that there are moments in our life that are sane and insane, and whenever you're insane, nobody's calling you insane.
Right.
Right, because I've developed this language because it's one that we use. It's a vernacular that we use often as a staff while I'm sane.
Yeah.
Right, and so I've said that before to Hope, and she's like, "Did you just call me insane?" And I'm like, No. So we'll explain that though for people to understand that process. Yes. So and maybe so I can trim this out to explain it to Hope.
Well, and when we're saying we're in our right mind, right? So the definition of insanity. There's a billion of them, but let me take one that's a little further out there, maybe a little more wounding even. So I've dealt with suicidal people, and I've dealt with families that have had a family member be successful at suicide. And inevitably, all of the damage, all of the wounds, all the trauma that come out of it. And if I'm able, and it's the appropriate time, I describe how God doesn't judge insanity, right? So children, before they're of the age of reason, and I don't know what that is, that's individual, that's between God and that child. If something happens to them, what they die, what happens? Well, they're going to go to heaven because they were before the age of reason. Another way to look at that is they're before the reason of adult sanity, right? They were before that age, this adult sanity. So now we have a person who's going to take their life. So if you don't know how to swim and we're by a very deep pool and I'm walking next to you and I push you into the pool and you land in the middle of the pool, what is the very first thing, even though you don't know how to swim, what's the very first thing you try to do?
Swim.
And the question is why? Because that's innate. That's sane. We fight for life. Insanity is the exact opposite of that, where we don't fight for life anymore, where we would just go, this must be my lot. I'll just suck in, right? Yeah. So God doesn't judge the insane at those that are not of reasonable age or reasonable mind. That's what that is, of a reasonable mind. God's not going to judge that. So what it means is in a small way, much smaller than this,
Right.
we can have these flickers where, so a moment of insanity for you. Okay.
Explain one of mine that I've had.
Well, simple, and you're not going to like this one, but
okay.
Oklahoma loses.
Yeah.
And the feelings that happen right after, is that the time for me to come and ask you for a raise?
Right.
Right? Like if you're my boss.
Right.
So they just lost, and it's like, great, they just lost. I'm calling Britton. No, I'm going to understand.
Right.
Even though I might not understand, I'm going to understand that this is the time he needs a few.
Yeah.
This is an emotional event. And so something happened, something triggered within him because he really, really, really wanted his team to win. And however much importance is attached to that, it doesn't really matter. But there's this, that's a moment where it's like, let's.
It's an example. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the realm of communication, when I'm hearing, and I love this analogy, that's why I wanted you to dive into it, because it's one that is useful to understand who is my person, right? Who is Heidi? Who is Hope? Who is my person at their absolute clearest of mind? And when they separate from that, I have to understand that that's not who they are. That's just where they're existing for a moment.
Yes.
And so to meet them there and expect to have civil, useful, or meaningful conversation in that headspace and try to force it, I think is a big force of a lot of the issues that we experience.
Yes.
And I think that in loving one another, we need to be patient enough to go through the process of seeing that person who's left who they know themselves to be, their identity was the word you used, their security that they have and who God is or whatever, speaking to the Christian, to be patient enough to allow them to process out of that and then process back into it. And sometimes that might be the walk between the house and the garage.
Yep.
Sometimes it might be an hour. Sometimes it might be 6 hours. Sometimes it might be a month. But allowing the patience, the love, and the space, right? And maybe not a month. Maybe that's when you start trying to find some help or some counseling.
Yeah,
or
but
whatever.
that was hyperbole.
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
But I think that in communication, that is a discounted skill.
It is,
and it's because of, I think, trauma that we've experienced in our own life. Because when people leave, they're gone forever.
Right. And but there's also two sides to that.
Yeah.
That we have to really identify. So the person who's being left in the sane world, let's say.
Right.
So one traveled to the insane orbit, and the other one's left in the sane planet.
Yeah.
Right. So what in particular Christians have this grandiose thought of how much power they have. Right? Even to the point of like, wow, if I prayed harder or I did, it's like, really? So yeah, go do the jig outside and see if that gets them back.
It's called a rain dance.
Yes, a rain dance. But there's a thought that I have some responsibility. I have power over that insanity.
Yeah.
And if I would have said something different, done it right, did, ad nauseum, what that is saying is I have the power over that other person's sanity. We don't. We have the power of encouragement.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And we have the power to love them where they're at. And we have to have the power to let them go. And hopefully they're going to come back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that power comes from our identity and relationship with Christ. Our identity and relationship with God.
So why do you think we as a people, as individuals, struggle with that idea of letting them go?
Because they might not come back. And what does it say if they don't come back? It says, I'm jacked up. I wasn't worth loving. I wasn't important enough. Now when we're dealing with a spouse, we're gonna talk a little different. But in the general world, that's a pretty grandiose picture of yourself, that you're that important.
Right.
And most of the time we're not that important. We really aren't.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had the experience where, like you've been to somebody's house and you did something and you feel kind of guilty about it and you don't go back until 6 months later or whatever, and you're there and you're like, hey, sorry about that. And they're like, what?
I got it right here. You ready?
Yeah.
So I just got a new job at the last church I was at, and the he was like the worship pastor, kind of discipleship pastor, invited me over for his 2-year-old's daughter, her second birthday party. So I go to their birthday party. I'm there with a bunch of people I don't know. He's being really nice to me. They have the lowest ceiling fan known to mankind. And so I'm sitting on the couch at a 2-year-old's birthday party. We've just distributed cake and ice cream, so I'm at an all-time high. And I stand up and I hit my head on the ceiling fan. But as I'm hitting my head, I shatter 2 light bulbs, and the glass from those light bulbs go everywhere in this house. People are sitting there, like the floors are covered in it. There's glass in people's ice cream. And this 2-year-old is screaming because her mom has had to take away her birthday cake because it's now covered in glass. Then they get it all cleaned up. Dust is settled. We sit back down. Tim, I did it again.
Oh, no.
I promise, did it again. I didn't go back to their house.
What a moron.
I didn't go back to their house for like 6 months. And I remember one day he's like, hey, bro, like, what's going on? Why haven't you been back? And he's like, dude, I just assumed you all hated me. Yeah. And he's like, I was like, I ruined your kid's birthday party. And he's like, we don't give a crap. We think it's hilarious. So, I have no idea what we're talking about, but I needed to say that story.
No. Okay, so humor is vastly important, right? Yeah. And taking ourselves seriously all of the time is, man, it's a big mistake in life, and we're gonna die, and we're gonna find our humor well, is so full, it'll look like we didn't spend any of it. We got to spend some humor, right? So one of the things that happens within groups. So you leading student ministries, you guys have a big event coming up, and you're going to be out at a winter fest or whatever. What's it called?
Freeze Out.
Freeze Out. See, I should have remembered that.
It's a very northern Michigan name.
It is. So doing this Freeze Out, and here's what's going to happen. You guys are going to be there. Something stupid is going to happen.
Bill Stone.
Yeah, it could be. It may be running. Trying to go outdoors, and they're trying to go out and push out a door that pushes in.
Yes.
Right? And when somebody else splats against that door, that makes me die laughing.
Yes.
Right? But we call it a member win. Mm-hmm. That's a member win moment.
Yeah.
And that's what draws people together.
Yeah.
Right? So you're going to go on this event, something stupid's going to happen, and that will be something that all of the kids who went and all of the adults who went, all you have to do is bring up.
Yes.
Bill Stone. Freeze Out 2023.
Yep.
And everybody's going to die laughing, right? Yep. So we need that. Mm-hmm. And that's called common language. It tells an entire story, but not only a story, it tells an entire experience.
Yeah. Break that down.
The whole experience of the time. And that common language, right? So most people that I work with anyways have a common language, but it's almost all negative. Right? Yeah. So they can say a negative thing and it brings back an entire chapter.
Yeah.
And they're very, very good at wielding that weapon. Mm-hmm. So what we need to do is something different. So I'm going to tell you a stupid story.
I'm excited.
Okay? I'm sure you are. So the question is Benjamin excited? Will you ask him?
Benji, you good? You excited? Glad to be here.
that was the most emphatic sure ever. Thank you for that. Okay, after the story. I don't know if you heard this one upstairs or not, but there's this gentleman, and he's got a job that makes him travel, right? So he has his home, and he's got, a bunch of critters, and his grandma lives there. And he's got a big garden out back. And so he's got to travel to Europe, and he's going to be gone for like 2 months, right?
Okay.
So he would call back every now and then. So his friend is staying at his house taking care of everything. He's, working as well. But he's like the caretaker. And so, he's always working on the garden, taking care of all the critters, talking with grandma, just making sure she's happy and good. And one day he's getting ready to leave for the day. And as he opens the door, Muffy, the cat, just goes screaming out the door and doesn't stop and goes right into traffic and is killed. So poor Muffy is dead. So that evening, his friend calls and says, hey, man, thanks for doing what you're doing. Really glad about this. I'm wondering how things are going. My job's going well. Be home in a month. And the guy's like, yeah, man, everything's great. Except Muffy just ran out the door and just got hit by a car and killed today. And the guy's like, what? He goes, yeah, Muffy got killed today. Ran right out in front of a car, got run over, squished. The guy's like, what is wrong with you? You don't just give that kind of news that abruptly. You need to step into the story. And the guy's like, well, I don't know. What are you talking about? He goes, well, you got to tell me about Muffy, and Muffy was this, and Muffy was that. And, maybe I don't know, Muffy's lost. I can't find Muffy right now. And then the next time I talk to you, man, well, we found Muffy, but Muffy's on the roof, right? And, and then you're working to the death. So after a bunch of apology, the guy's like, okay, cool. And the guy's like, okay, how are the rest of my animals? They're good. They're all good. How's the garden? Good. And he says, how's Grandma? And the guy goes, Grandma's on the roof. Stupidest story ever, right? So, and that's a joke from probably 25 years ago that I heard. And that's one of the things that, Heidi will call and we'll be talking. And, I've shared my adversarial relationship with my dog. It's like, oh, how's Otis? And every now and then, Otis is on the roof, And so we use that joke statement. And it's that common language. And it tells an entire story. And it brings Heidi and I back to that time in our life that was really joyous and good.
Yeah, that's cool.
But it's that common language. And we have it at the tabernacle, And we have it at the tabernacle like on an insider way. We're much too big of a church to have it the humorous stuff. So our common language is big rocks, dominoes, that type of stuff. But then we have traveling ones like we've gone somewhere, and what happens when five guys are traveling somewhere. Where do we eat? What do we do? I still remember we stopped at Five Guys Burgers. The last time we were heading south, and Adam ordered. I was with like 3 or 4 of us because there was like multiple places to go, and so we sit down and Adam opens his burger and they forgot to put meat on his burger. So he's got all the lettuce and all of the stuff extra. And he was so shy, he wasn't going to go up and just say, you screwed my burger up. He kept thinking that they might think he scarfed the meat or something. But I'm sitting here watching, going, how could you make this mistake?
Right.
It's the primary ingredient, right?
Why you exist.
So there's just that, and that brings that joy of laughter.
Yeah.
Right?
I think about the moment on a trip where we're all together and we're in the room, right?
Yeah.
John Woodhouse gets up to preach, and there's just that. If you would turn with me to 1 Kings.
Yeah.
And now that's our common language as a pastoral team.
I just heard it from John this week. Yep.
So, but how has that common language helped you and Heidi in your own communication at home?
It has. There's been areas that have been difficult, and we've been able to describe how it affects us without it being threatening to the other person.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, if work gets chaotic and maybe there's been enough crisis, and I use a phrase like I've used all of my words, one of the things that also triggers is when I get my words back, my wife. So I'm very, very, very protective of what I share with my wife. She does not know everything that goes on at church because she doesn't need to, number one, and I don't want to burden her with it.
Yeah.
And there's also times where there's privacy. And when I say I'm not going to tell anybody, I don't tell anybody.
Right.
Her included. But she will come and, in her Heidi way, ask me if there's something. Is there something you'd like to talk about? Is there anything I could take off your plate? Is there anything I could take off your plate that's not related to the issue, right? So that common language is like, rather than having to sit down and describe all of the feelings and all of the things that are perceived crisis, and maybe given too much information, she knows I've already processed. And her desire is, if there's something I could do, I'm willing to add that to my schedule because it will help you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Hope and I developed one super simple, but I think there are moments we both have realized over time that we're more introverted than we originally imagined. And I know as people interact with me, that's not always their first thought that that's my personality, but it tends to be more often than not. And there will be times or days or evenings where our time together is spent silently. But before we can get to that place, we just have a simple question, and it's just, you good? And that's a safe phrase. You do not answer yes if you're not, because it is 100%. If I hear the phrase, I'm good, then I can trust it. And that's what it's had to become for us. And it's a sigh of relief. And so there will be moments at night where you're laying there and you're thinking about the times you sucked. And I know she's still awake because I can feel her rolling around or deep sighing because I'm rolling or snoring or whatever.
Can't sit still.
And I can just say the phrase, you good? I'm good. You good? I'm good. And then it's just that.
Awesome.
But it's also became a space where you good, prepare for impact if the person is not.
Yes, exactly.
But that's a common language that we've developed as well.
Yeah, and if you ask the question, you have to be willing to accept either answer.
Exactly.
And that's a learning curve.
Yep.
Because I've had similar times when my wife wasn't good and needed to talk, and I really didn't have to give what I wanted to be able to give her.
Right.
At that time, so that's a learning curve.
Yep, 100%.
So if we try and we fail, that's okay. The try part is really important.
That's key.
Getting to success is important as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that's on you to continue to work on that.
Yeah.
The last thing I would add, is really simply compliment your wife.
Yes.
And the one thing that is our greatest treasure is something that sometimes I and maybe other guys take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's always going to be here.
100%.
And I deserve this or whatever.
Yep.
And it can be it could be a compliment on food.
Yep.
It can be a compliment on dress,
Mm-hmm.
on beauty, on wisdom, on their understanding. Sometimes my wife will explain something she read out of scripture. It's like, I'm stealing that.
Oh yeah.
That was brilliant.
Hope is so much smarter than me.
Yeah. But don't assume that you can overcompliment your wife.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And don't use it as a bribe.
Yep.
Ever.
That's the thing that I think is a troublesome space. It's the only time women are hearing nice things about them is when somebody wants something in return.
Yeah.
And it can be triggering for somebody.
Oh, of course.
So
that's.
I think for men listening to this podcast, find a space to love your wife well with no strings attached.
Yep.
Is a key. That's something that I've learned as well.
And one of our key roles is to encourage,
Mm-hmm.
and encourage our wives, and complimenting is part of that, but also maybe seeing an area that there's a little bit of struggle, a little bit of lack of self-confidence, and being that encourager is one of the things I need to do for my wife is, as a pastor's wife, there are self-imposed expectations because she's a pastor's wife, and then there are corporately put together expectations because she's a pastor's wife. And we've done, as a leadership, we've worked really hard to not put our spouses. If you're a woman working here, we didn't hire your husband. Mm-hmm. If you're a guy working here, we didn't hire your wife. We hired you.
Yep.
And that's really important.
It's communicated well.
Yes.
I will give credit to that.
There are times where our wives need that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, it's okay to just sit.
Yeah.
What if you didn't go to X meeting, whether it's at church or somewhere else, because you're tired, and that's enough reason to stay home.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also, like, for Hope, knowing she doesn't have to be there makes her want to be there.
Yeah.
And I think I see that as well in some of the tendencies with Heidi, too. I think there's just that piece of her is the fact that, no, I'm going because I want to.
Yeah.
And so, that's
Very
good.
Much.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think there were some key takeaways: communication, be patient, develop common language, and dudes, you haven't loved her enough yet.
Yep. That's the takeaway. We have not loved our wives enough yet.
Yeah, sweet. That was fun.
Any
final questions?
I want to know what Benji's looking for in a wife.
Benji pleads the fifth on that. Am I correct? That means you're not going to answer. Or do you want to answer? Plead the fifth. Benji pleads the fifth.
Pleads the fifth. Okay. Smart man. You can punch me once the mics are off. Okay.
Love it. Well, Ghost Energy, no free shout outs. Tim needs more coffee. We got Chick-fil-A today, but still no free shout outs. Benji, what do you want? Benji got that double bass pedal. I'm ready to see this dude get after it. So is there anything? No free sticks, nothing? Love it. Students listening to this, freeze out. Is it good? Dead and gone. We already did it, but man, it was fun, and I'm talking on the other side of it. So you'll hear my voice next weekend, and it'll be a lot more tired. But till next time, Tab family, this is Tim, Benji, and Britton signing off.